Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about, in what I've overall said is a very eventful day, the testimony of Madeleine Westerhout. That was interesting and a mixed bag. I thought in some ways really good for Trump, but there's some open questions that it leaves. So she is the woman who becomes his executive assistant at the White House. And so she's right outside the Oval Office. She hadn't met him before. She came from the RNC. And, she was a custodian. That's why they called her. So they were just basically introducing certain emails about phone calls or meetings involving Michael Cohen, and Keith Schiller and David Pecker. And then what seemed to be the final point that they were building for is in the very first days with Ron Graff, who is his longtime assistant over a Trump organization. They produce a list of frequent callers, and the suggestion is they're the people who should be put through, who would come visit, etc. And on the list are David Pecker, Keith Schiller, and importantly, Michael Cohen. And we even went through the first meeting that they were to have. And so that seemed like what it was about. She's a custodian. In other words, she's there to, make this record authentic, and so it can be brought into evidence. But then they started asking her, they just asked about leaving the job. And the testimony turned on a dime. She began to tear up and then really cry. She said that she had what she thought was an off-the-record conversation, but it wasn't. So it came out, and she was indiscreet, and she made it sound basically like she'd made a terrible mistake, and she deservedly got fired, but she felt, horrible about it. And then they went sort of further in, did the prosecution, presumably because this was going to happen on cross. So they wanted to sort of take the sting out, but they just had her testify about him and really gave glowing reviews about the kind of boss he was. Well, 2 points. Great boss, fair, always treated me well, etc. But then what a great family man he was, and all this stuff about him and Melania, and how she would come in, Melania, and they would laugh a lot, and how he would sometimes call her out the window when he was leaving on the helicopter, and she thought it was so cute. And they really portrayed a pretty damn loving relationship. And it would certainly be consistent with that he would have been, really concerned about her finding out about Stormy Daniels. And she, in telling the story of being fired, I mean, she went from teary to close to sobbing on the stand, and really, blaming herself and extolling him. And then on cross, more of that. And, what a great boss he was, and family man, etc., and how much he loved his children and the like. And that was the end of the testimony. And it seemed to me like about the best 5 minutes Trump had, not just that he's praised, but praised by, and this is sort of the third woman who, worked, I'm thinking of Hope Hicks and Madeleine Westerhout, but also Rona Graff, and very high marks as a boss, but especially this stuff about Melania, which, wants to be his, a pillar of his defense. He was just trying to shield her. And again, that's how it ended. And I thought, man, they've got, why did they do that exactly? And so possibly they wanted to do it because it would be worse if Trump would, or I don't think they had to use her. It's the best way, but I think not the only way to authenticate that piece of paper. And I was talking about with different lawyers, and now there's the punchline of it, which is why she gets fired. And I've tweeted this out, a pretty good article in Politico by Lipman, no relation. But basically, she tells these reporters that he doesn't want to be photographed with Tiffany because she's fat, and she wouldn't, they wouldn't. I mean, she really disparages. She gets fired for disparaging him as a father and a family man, sort of the exact opposite of what she tells the jury. So we're left with this question: is this going to come out somehow and totally undermine what I think was a pretty effective sob story that the jury took notice of? But how will it come out, or why didn't it come out in the redirect? That the details have been murky. That is, a lot of it's not 100% clear. This is what happened, but it's seems pretty substantiated. In any event, they could just ask her about it. So a strange kind of 15 minutes that is overall, I think, good for Trump, but there may be the kind of follow through to happen where the facts of what she said come through, and the jury thinks that she was, basically laying it on thick and not telling the truth. But, it's again, a very sort of confusing witness, and I did think the jury was attentive and sympathetic overall. It's a story that starts out very routine and then becomes emotional, and so it was strongly punctuated in the actual testimony. It left this kind of dramatic kind of after effect, that intense testimony does. So we'll see what happens with that. If nothing, they've got a lot to work with in the closing about how he was worried about Melania. But we'll see if something to remember in general as we approach the end of the case. The defense then has a chance to put on a case. They may do nothing or very little, but then there's a rebuttal case, and that's the last evidence that the prosecution that the jury hears. So it may be there are certain really key and strong pieces of evidence that they're kind of hanging back with, depending on what the defense says. But that is left with a pretty big question mark, and what I think for the jury was much more good for Trump than bad, and especially in the suggestion of the warm relationship with Melania, which, by the way, is very widely reported to be false. But that should be neither here nor there, except that's going to be one of his defenses about what he was doing, paying, trying to keep her quiet, which now, by the way, as I mentioned in another YouTube today, he has copped to. The evidence now before the jury has him admitting that he paid Michael Cohen $130,000, another kind of, big event in a day of pretty damn big events. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.